One. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the KevOle Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter, of course, at KEVOLE. Add me as a friend on Facebook if you want, Kevin Olenek, and subscribe on iTunes and Spotify, and leave a nice comment if you have done that. Lots of focus, of course. It's hard not to focus on COVID-19, and we see numbers spiking in the United States again, numbers coming out all the time. But one of the things that has not been focused on it's not just the numbers and the specific disease, it's also the after effects of COVID-19 and what happens after that. And that's what our topic is today. Our guest today is a renowned lawyer in Vancouver, if I do say so myself. She is part of IRPlawyer.com, expertise in DUI and IRP, top 25 most influential lawyers in 2019, badass 2019 writer, Métis. Kyla Lee is with us. Hello, Kyla. How are you?
I'm not bad, thanks. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So for those who don't know, and because you've been very public about your journey, you admitted publicly that you had COVID. So kind of take us back to that and that process for people who missed it. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so back in March, I went to Ohio in the middle of March. The day before I left, I guess it was March 9th, I looked at the U.S. Statistics for COVID-19 because, by then we were starting to actually get worried about it here in, Canada. And I saw Ohio had one case, and it wasn't where I was going. I was going to Columbus, so I thought, I'll be fine. One case, not in the city I'm going to be in. How many people actually go to Columbus anyway? Nothing bad will happen to me. And then the third day I was in Ohio, which was the second day of a conference I was presenting at, the Ohio governor came out, made a public announcement saying, we have consulted with our epidemiologists and we think there are 100,000 undetected cases of COVID-19 in Ohio. We don't have the testing kits, so we can't test anyone to confirm this. But the data that we've looked at, we have been able to confidently say that we think it's this bad. So they started issuing all sorts of orders, including shutting down our conference. So day 3 of the conference ended up being pivoted to completely online and just the speakers in the room because we weren't allowed, our group of 200 lawyers that it was supposed to be. And then I left on the 15th. I was very lucky because Trudeau had basically said, Canadians, if you're abroad, it's time to come home the day before. The next day I left, and within a couple days of that, the border was shut down. So nobody was coming home at all. They were canceling all the flights and, figuring out the rescue missions for people overseas. So it was a very exciting day. The struggle to get back home. If people remember that shot of the Chicago airport, just jam-packed with people rushing to get out of the U.S., that was me that day.
Oh, wow.
I flew through Chicago and I was there then. It was crazy. And it was a little bit scary. It was being... it was nothing I'd ever experienced. I travel a lot for work, and there was just this tension that was palpable in the air, in the airports. I imagine probably what it would have been like flying shortly after 9/11. Just everybody seemed really on edge and really nervous. And I was glad to get home when I did. Went straight into self-isolation because they'd also put into place the isolation order while I was away. And within a couple days, I started to get a fever, sore throat, a cough, shortness of breath, all the symptoms of COVID-19. So I booked an appointment with a doctor on a video chatting app that you can use to see a doctor, and she diagnosed me with COVID-19.
Wow! And how long ago was that?
I guess it was March 19th that I got my diagnosis.
Okay. And approximately how long did it take for you to recover?
It was 19 days until I was able to leave my house again. They told me that I could leave once I had 24 hours with no fever. The cough was gone basically right at 14 days. It was like textbook. But the fever lasted a little bit longer, and it wasn't until 19 days later, or whatever the math works out to be on that I stopped experiencing a fever.
Okay. So, and then from there, it's, this is, I think, a really good educational piece, because I wonder if people are thinking, well, we get COVID, it's 2 to 3 weeks, and this is why I appreciated when you tweeted this out, because there is other things that there's an after effect to this. So tell us kind of what has happened since then.
After I got sick in March and I got better, and I would go out. I was still working from home and still staying home a lot, but I would still go out, go to the vet's office, go to the grocery store. I went to see my mom over Easter weekend, like just minor stuff. Around the end of April, I started to get sick again. Like all the symptoms came back. I had fever, cough, sore throat, shortness of breath. It was really weird. And I went and got a COVID test because they'd opened up testing at that point to the public at large. So I got tested. It came back negative. I saw a doctor again over an app, and they went through this whole long list of I guess criteria, and then said, okay, you have to go to the ER. There were no doctor's offices open at that point. So I went to the ER. They did blood, they did urine, they did chest x-rays, and I was perfectly healthy. There was not a thing wrong with me. They could not explain why I had all of these persistent symptoms. They're like, something's wrong with you. It's been a week that you've had a fever. That's not normal. But we can't figure out anything wrong. And I had this horrible rash all over my face. Like my face was bright red. It looked like I'd been drinking heavily. But they couldn't figure out anything wrong. So they just told me to isolate, come back if it gets worse, and isolate until you're 24 hours without a fever. So back into, I'd been isolating since I started running a fever again, but, back into the pattern of isolation I went. And then just as suddenly as it happened, it disappeared. And then it happened again in near the end of June. And again, same thing. All of the symptoms came back. I had a test. It came back negative. I saw a doctor on an app. The doctor, just by coincidence, happened to be the same doctor who had been the one who diagnosed me with COVID. And she said, hey, I remember you. You had COVID, and now you're experiencing all of this. This is, we don't know a lot about this, but this is something that's been happening to a lot of people who had this. And I think what you're having is this viral response that is just a flare-up of the symptoms that continues even after it's over. And so that's what she diagnosed me with. She sent me to the ER again because she said, for some people, it gets worse than the actual disease. And you could have you could basically stop breathing while you're sleeping. So I need you to go get a bunch of blood work, get chest x-rays, do it all. You're probably fine, but we want to make sure you're not fine.
Right. Okay. So
off I went again.
Yes, the third trip. So how are you doing now? I guess
I'm fine now. A couple days later, I just totally back to normal. Fever gone, cough gone, sore throat gone, energy level back. It was there was nothing wrong with me. And it's like a light switch. It's on and off, where I'm fine and then I'm not fine. It's not when you get sick and you get a cold and there's the gradual onset and then it gradually gets better. It's not like that at all.
It's comes, yeah, that's interesting.
It's sudden, yeah.
So how with this, if it when you had when you first were diagnosed with COVID, and then you were thinking, okay, that you go through the process of your self-isolation, you get better. What were you thinking after you first got COVID, and now what is different of that? How have you adjusted since?
I mean, when I first got it, I thought a lot about whether I was going to die, right? We didn't know a lot about who lived and who died and why and how the virus affected people. This was, it was still very new to us here in Canada at that point in time. So I worried about that. I woke up a lot in the night with difficulty breathing, gasping for breath. And I thought, oh my God, is this it? Do I have to go to the hospital? What happens if I get put on a ventilator? Like just all of that, who's going to look after my dog? They can't come in my house to get my dog. What will happen? It's just like, planning for the end, which is a weird thing to go through when you're in your early 30s and otherwise completely healthy. And then, with the second flare up, it was kind of like just an incredible inconvenience because I'd already had COVID. I'm supposed to have immunity. What is going on here? This is interrupting me getting my life back on track. And now it's scary because I feel like I'm on this journey and I don't know if there is going to be an end. Are these going to get further and further apart until they stop happening? Or is this the rest of my life that I'm going to have to go back into isolation because I'm having like a resurgence of COVID? I don't know if I'm infectious to other people, even though I'm testing negative. Am I carrying the virus in a way that's not being picked up on these tests that are not very accurate to begin with? And can I make other people sick? Who have I put at risk? Am I transmitting something when I'm asymptomatic that I don't know about? Like all of these things are going through my head. It's a lot of questions.
So maybe we'll just want to ask you quickly about the test part. Like, what is that like? You mentioned the question about the accuracy. Kind of maybe tell us a little bit about that.
The tests are horrible, Kevin. It's like they stick a very long swab into your nostril and all the way through to the back of your throat where they rub it for 10 seconds. And it's like if you did a line of wasabi. If you snorted wasabi, like your eyes are watering. It's horrible. I do not recommend it. If you can avoid getting a test, avoid it. They've got a 70% sensitivity rate. So tests have a specificity rate and a sensitivity rate. So the specificity is the test's ability to detect the thing that it's looking for and separate it from anything else. And sensitivity is how likely it is to detect it if it's there or to not detect it if it's not there. Which means that 30% of negative results are false negatives.
Okay. So that just continues the battle of what we don't know what we're dealing with. And it also confirms, I think one of the worries or one of the things that people have said is that this sounds like this is way more than the flu.
Oh, it's definitely more than the flu. I've never been sick like that in my life.
So how is this for you, like in terms, are you working at home or are you working more at the office?
I'm back in the office now. I still monitor. Like if I start to feel a little off, I take my temperature. If I get like a weird thing, like the other day I had this random pain on the top of my ear, and I, started taking my temperature to see like, is this, some type of nerve pain associated with COVID? Everything I have, like, you get an itch or a mosquito bite, and you're like, is this COVID? Is this something that's happening to me because of COVID? So I'm very cautious about how I'm feeling and how I'm doing and monitoring that, because I'm not going to come in the office if I've got a fever or some type of unexplained symptom.
Fair. And what's been like, what about your interactions with people? Are you able to socialize, or has that changed for you? Or
I'm doing the distancing thing. So I've seen some of my friends. I had dinner for my birthday, and I had I got the restaurant to give me a private room, and everybody was just 6 feet apart. So we were able to distance. I had a dinner in a park with some friends who brought some takeout food, and we sat, like 10 feet apart in the park. And I had some friends over and we sat in my yard, 10 feet apart. And that's about the extent of my social interactions.
Right.
That's, yeah.
So I guess the other, the big thing also is not only the physical part. It really sounds like there's the mental health of this is a huge part of this as well. Sort of sounds a bit like I want to say like a PTSD sort of thing in a sense, or is that an accurate thing, or how would you describe that?
I wouldn't describe it so much as PTSD, but just, I guess I feel lost. Like, I don't feel like I know, like I'm in control of my body because I don't know what my body's going to do. And I don't have answers. And I think, eventually we're going to get the answers, right? Like, eventually they're going to have the research and the science, and we're going to know if there's immunity and if there's an immuno response and all of these things. We're going to have a vaccine, and it's all going to be good. It's going to happen eventually. But right now, I don't have any of those answers. And it's hard to just, comfort yourself by saying, oh, we'll know this information eventually, when you know that there's a possibility that you might not make it to that eventually.
And 2 more quick questions, I guess. What has been the response to social media? Like, what have you generally heard? Have you been speaking with people that have been going through a similar experience?
Lots of people who've had COVID or think they have COVID have been reaching out. I have open direct messages on all my social media platforms, so I get a lot of messages from people. But mostly it's just been people who are really supportive and being, thankful that I'm going public with my story. I think there's a lot of, and I feel this too, a lot of shame and a lot of stigma associated with having got COVID, because the assumption is you weren't doing something right. You touched your face, or you didn't wash your hands, or you got too close to people, or you went to a restaurant when you shouldn't have gone to a restaurant or a bar or whatever. There's a lot of blame, and you see that on social media too. Like, people are blaming other people for getting COVID because they did something that wasn't following the rules. And, that sucks. You shouldn't blame somebody because they're going through something awful. And so I was scared to do it because I didn't want to have to answer all of these questions. Well, why did you go to a conference in Ohio? Well, it's my job.
Right.
They weren't saying don't go to Ohio. They were saying take care and travel only if you have to. Well, I had to. It was work, and I took care.
Right.
It just wasn't enough,
And we didn't know what we knew then now, and there was one case. I think anybody would have done exactly what you did.
Yeah. I mean, I was supposed to have a co-presenter. He didn't go because he was sick with COVID symptoms. He was like, I don't think I should go. And I was like, that's a good idea. But there were 30 people that presented at this conference, and they all went, right? Like, nobody, it wasn't just me. So, but I'm the only one that got sick.
Oh, that's horrible. I am sorry for that. The final thing I wanted to, and I know you're not in employment law, but I do wonder, we just sort of the importance of getting educated from an employee perspective of your rights as an employee if you've been through COVID, and understanding even after you recover, and I'm using air quotes, that there are still things, how to make sure that the employer is not taking advantage of you.
Yeah, I mean, an employer has an obligation to keep the workplace safe. So if you're an employer and your employee says, I'm experiencing symptoms and I don't think I should come in, and remember that the public health officers are all saying, if you're sick, don't go out. You as an employer have to, unfortunately, despite the fact that there is the potential for people to take advantage of this, you have to take those people at their word. You have to give them the opportunity to stay home, to work from home if they're able, and to allow it. Obviously, if it goes on for a long period of time, you could say, now that there are, drive-through, no appointment necessary testing sites available, you need to go get a test. You can you can put some limitations on it because you shouldn't have to pay people to just not come in and not work. But you do have the right as an employee to a safe workplace, and your employer has an obligation to make sure it's safe for you. And that means keeping people who are exhibiting symptoms from coming into the workplace until such a time as we know what we're dealing with, that we have a vaccine, that we can treat it, and that it's hopefully one day going to be no different than any other flu.
Right, exactly. Until then, yeah. Well, Kyla, thank you for taking some time out of your busy day for coming on. For those who do want to connect with you, how can they connect with you?
You can find me on Twitter at IRP Lawyer. You can find me online, kylalee.ca, or on Instagram, Kyla Lee Lawyer, or you can contact my office, Acumen Law.
Okay, awesome. Thank you again, Kyla, and thanks to everyone for listening, and we will talk to you all soon. Bye for now.
Thanks for having me.